Thursday, January 10 edition of PFT PM, and oh my, it took 15 days, but it finally happened. Someone advancing the ball in a significant way on the story that first emerged on Pablo Torre Finds Out with yours truly riding sidecar. Pablo and I worked together on the reporting that culminated in the disclosure of a 61-page ruling in a major collusion case that, even though the NFL Players Association lost, there was a partial victory in the finding that the NFL Management Council, with the blessing of the commissioner, had urged teams to collude over guaranteed pay after the Deshaun Watson $230 million fully guaranteed deal. And even though the arbitrator, in my opinion, got it wrong as to his finding that there was no actual collusion, despite the league's urging, the evidence that came out and then made its way into the ruling could have made some hay with it. So the union didn't make any hay with it. The league obviously wanted nothing to do with it. It was buried for 5+ months until Pablo got his hands on it. We spent a lot of time talking about it. The audience was far more interested in it than I thought the audience would be, which was heartening. Because, hey, we just want football. We don't care about all this other stuff. Well, some of this other stuff's important, and you need to understand it. And if things are going on that are affecting players collectively, if the teams are trying to do through the back door what the union hasn't been able to accomplish, and let me try that over again. If the teams are blocking efforts to do through the back door what the union hasn't been able to accomplish through the front door, if they're coming together, working together, coordinating, colluding, that's a problem. That's an issue. That's not how things are supposed to go. Now, does it affect who's going to win the Super Bowl? No, but it's just part of the broader imbalance between the owners who put nothing on the line. Oh, there's business risk. No, there isn't. Not when they're printing money. The days of business risk in the NFL are forever gone. So you've got the owners, the ultra fat cats. You got the players who are putting their lives literally on the line, their health on the line, their long-term cognitive function on the line. And this is an imbalance. And this is something that came to light and that for whatever reason the NFL Players Association hid. Now that the cat's out of the bag, now that the NFLPA has been shamed into taking action, the NFLPA is going to appeal the ruling. And my first thought was, how in the hell can you appeal it 6 months later? You know, I've practiced a little law in my time. I was never involved in any type of case where you had 6 months to make up your mind on whether or not you were going to appeal. Usually it's 30 days. Sometimes it's 20 days. You got to file paperwork to initiate. It's pretty simple. You don't have to submit the whole brief. You just have to give notice that you're doing it. And then the work comes later. 6 months? No way. Well, here's what PFT reported last night, adding to what Don Van Natta Jr. and Kalen Kaler unearthed. And their item was great. I mean, it was chock full of good stuff. I think I posted 5 items, 5 distinct theories and approaches and concepts from that story. But the thing that we learned and added to it, at the time the league and the union came together with their secret agreement to keep it quiet, they agreed that the litigation moving forward would be paused indefinitely until one side or the other decided to unpause it. So they collectively pressed the pause button. And then the idea was whenever the NFL or the NFLPA wants to unpause, you just hit the button and unpause it. That's what 2 weeks after the collusion ruling came to light, 2 weeks after the players found out or were in a position to find out, agents found out, there apparently was, some consternation. Cam Hayward, NFL-PA executive committee member, longtime Steelers defensive lineman, he declined comment to ESPN because things are, quote unquote, dicey. There will be, and there should be in place now, a 3-judge panel to handle the appeal. I've read the relevant portion of the collective bargaining agreement, so you don't have to. And trust me, you don't want to. I don't want to. I just do it because it's part of, what I do. There's no standard that I've seen for what the appeal will be. Usually what happens when you have a lower court that makes a decision, when you go to the next level up, there's a standard of review. And the standard of review is critical. Sometimes it's what they call de novo, where you start over. You just do it again. Sometimes they call the standard abuse of discretion, where there's a range of potential outcomes that fall within the discretion of the judge. And as long as the judge didn't abuse his or her discretion, it stands, even if the body handling the appeal would have reached a different conclusion. So that's more deference to the lower court. Arbitrary and capricious are terms that get used from time to time. That's a standard of review that can apply. I don't see anything which tells me that it may just be another bite at the apple. It may just be that the arguments that were made to the system arbitrator now get made to the 3-judge panel, and all you got to do is convince 2 of them. Whichever side convinces 2, or obviously 3, they win, and that's it. It's final, it's over, it's done, finito. So that's next, and that'll play out in the coming weeks and months, and it's basically all on paper. There's no new hearing. Now, I assume that if the appeals panel has some sort of question that wasn't resolved, I don't know if there's it's very bare bones. The provision of the CBA does not go into a lot of detail about the powers of the appeals panel or the standard of review. It tells me you're getting a fresh start. Now, I need to poke around a little more just to see if that is the case, but I see nothing in the CBA, and my gut tells me that there's nothing in there that would give any type of deferential power to the lower level ruling. Then it is just a fresh look, and you get another shot. And if you get lucky, the ruling that, if you're the NFLPA, was against you, that becomes the ruling that is in your favor, and you win. Now, if they win, I have no idea how to calculate damages, but they could still win because I believe there's enough evidence there. I know if I was one of the 3 judges on this panel, I'd say that the circumstantial evidence of actual collusion is there. And we've talked about it at length. The text messages between Michael Bidwell and Dean Spanos after the Kyler Murray deal, the internal communications within the Denver Broncos organization after the Russell Wilson deal, that's all circumstantial evidence of collusion. And I think it was just yesterday that I reconciled John Mara's very self-serving, we don't tell other teams what to do, we're competing, with reality. You lock into a story very early and you stick to your story. So we'll see if the 3-judge panel, if at least 2 of them apply common sense, or will 2 of them be hyper-technical and accept the sworn testimony of those who may very well be pushing a story that they have no choice but to push. Now, here's the other side of it. And this was in the last paragraph of the item from Van Natta and Kaler. First sentence, last paragraph. The NFL has advised the NFLPA that it intends to seek more than $12 million in reimbursement for attorney's fees and costs that it incurred in defending against the collusion case. Now, in the American system of civil justice, here's how this typically works. You pay for your own lawyer, with exception, and there are exceptions, but you pay for your own lawyer, win or lose. And if you lose, you don't have to pay for the other side's lawyer. Now, in other countries, like in the UK, if you lose, you have to pay the other side's legal fees. So you better be right if you're going to take somebody to court, because if you swing and miss, it's going to be very expensive. And that dissuades a lot of people from taking their chances, because a lot of cases that get filed in the American civil justice system are, it's a roll of the dice. Let's see what discovery shows. We have an instinct here that maybe there's something in this case. Let's go find some evidence to back it up. And that's legitimate, and that happens. So if this were a normal situation, there'd be no standing for the NFL to recover attorney's fees from the NFLPA. In a usual American civil case, there is some discretion available for the judge to award costs, not attorney's fees, but costs. And a lot of times what happens is, if it's an individual that's going up against a big company, and I represented a lot of individuals who had their employment terminated in ways that we believed violated state, federal, and it was usually state law that we focused on. But, if you lose that case against big bad company, they can still come after the person that they fired, the person who may not have much money, and say, we want you to pay our litigation costs. And what that ends up becoming, and I've seen this happen, I've been involved in this on both sides, that amount of money, and it's not a crippling amount, but for somebody who doesn't have any money, it's a lot of money to come up. $5,000, $7,000. Where am I going to get $5,000 or $7,000? What happens is the company puts together its cost petition and then says, hey, if you will waive your appeal rights, we'll withdraw our request for costs. And that's important because there's a chance that the NFL stating its intention to seek more than $12 million from the NFLPA is the next step in this coordinated, choreographed dance between the league and the union. That when the union finds out officially that the league wants more than $12 million, that's when Lloyd Howell can say, well, hey, executive committee, we should waive our appeal rights. And if we do, the league will withdraw its request for $12 million plus in fees and costs. And I'm told that the league's already made that offer, that happened back at the time the ruling came out. So I'm going to be very, very curious to see whether or not this appeal is quickly resolved with an agreement with the league that the league is going to give up its claim for more than $12 million in fees and costs. And you can look at it and say, well, okay, hey, they get something out of it. They get $12 million. They don't have to pay the $12 million. Here's the problem. We have the post at PFT, and we have the language quoted from the collective bargaining agreement that explains under what circumstances the league would be able to get fees and costs from the NFLPA. This is one of those situations where there is an exception. And the collusion provision of the CBA, Article 17, which sets forth the protocol for pursuing these claims, there is a provision in there that allows for the arbitrator to award fees and costs if it finds that one of the two sides to the case made a claim or asserted a defense that had no reasonable basis. Basically, that it was frivolous. There's nothing to it. You're floating a bullcrap theory. You're pursuing a bullcrap idea. How in the world, in this case, when you have a finding that the NFL, through the Management Council, with the blessing of the commissioner, urged teams to collude, how in the world would the arbitrator find there was no reasonable basis for making the collusion claim? They found evidence, and they got a finding by the arbitrator that there was an urging to collude. So here's the bottom line. To the extent that it feels like the league and the union are in cahoots and have been in cahoots, it's easy to stay in cahoots because the union just says, well, that $12 million, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to come up with. We don't have $12 million laying around. So at least we get some value from this collusion case. We don't have to pay the NFL's legal fees. And that's how they would try to sell it. My point is this, and this is speaking to the players who aren't watching this. Hey, players who aren't watching this, don't fall for that. Don't fall for it, because you may have something with your appeal. Who knows? The $12 million, now, look, it's easy for me to say because it's not my money, but my understanding of that standard, unless the arbitrator is corrupt or stupid, he's not going to give the NFL $12 million because there was a reasonable basis for bringing the case, as proven by the partial victory in the case. So players who aren't watching or listening because, number one, you don't care what I have to say, and number two, you're generally apathetic about these issues. If you happen to stumble across this, if someone sends it to you and you've made it this far without falling asleep or otherwise losing interest, let me tell you, you should not do a deal with the league that would entail giving up your appeal in exchange for the league dropping its claim for $12 million plus in fees and costs. Don't do it. Don't do it. And if any of you want to talk to me about it, I'm easy to find. Florio at profootballtalk.com. I'm happy to give you unofficial recommendations, insight, advice, whatever. I'm no longer a lawyer. I haven't practiced law in 16 years. I can't represent anyone, but I can tell you more about why I think what I think if you have any questions, and I'll happily do that if you're interested. But my guess is the over-under on communications I actually receive from members of the executive committee, members of the board of player reps, anyone tied to the union, the over-under is 0.5, and I would smash the under. Now, it gets better, or it gets worse, as the case may be, for Lloyd Howell. The story that came out today from Van Natta and Kaler, who have been doing, as I said earlier, great work pushing this thing forward. It relates to Lloyd Howell and a pretty obvious conflict of interest that he has. Because according to this report, citing multiple unnamed sources, Lloyd Howell became, in March of 2023, 3 months before he was hired to be the NFLPA's executive director, during a very bizarrely secretive selection process. Nobody even knew who the other candidates were. 3 months before he got the gig, he became a part-time consultant for the Carlyle Group. And the Carlyle Group became particularly relevant to the National Football League last year when the NFL decided to embrace private equity minority interests, where teams can sell limited slivers of their team to pre-approved private equity groups. And one of the handful, plus a finger or two, of private equity groups who have been pre-authorized by the NFL to purchase minority stakes in teams. One of those funds, the Carlyle Group. And the reporting from Van Natta and Kaler indicates that an unnamed union lawyer, probably Heather McPhee, but we don't know, but Heather McPhee has been blowing the whistle effectively. She's been acting in the best interest of the players to try to address these things that don't seem right. And when you find out that the executive director of the NFLPA, who made $3.6 million in his first year on the job, has a side hustle as a consultant with a company that is now in a position to buy minority interest in NFL teams, it's a conflict of interest. It cannot stand. It cannot last. So, according to the report, the unnamed union lawyer raised the issue with Lloyd Howell and suggested that he resign his part-time employment with the Carlyle Group. And reportedly, he declined. Now, Howell declined comment, but ESPN used, and hey, look, I'm applauding their reporting. They can do whatever they want and how they report it, but they gave anonymity to a source who provided the self-serving Lloyd Howell version, which was he doesn't recall that it was anything other than a union employee. Basically, it may not have been a lawyer who raised the issue, and he said he would do due diligence on the issue. He didn't decline. Well, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because he's still a part-time consultant with the Carlyle Group. So if he did take it under advisement, if he did agree to do due diligence, he didn't resign. And that's what we have right now. And when I read that today, and look, I do a blend of reporting and analysis and opinion expression. I've met Lloyd Howell once, maybe twice. Pleasant guy. Have a good line of communication with the NFLPA. Well, I did as of 16 days ago. I don't know where it stands right now. And I have no malice. I have no animosity. I just know this. When he got the job, the process was so weird, and it was so unnecessarily secretive, and it had no transparency whatsoever, either for the people on the outside or for the people on the inside. This is why I say that, for years the league has weaponized the players' apathy against them, starting with the selection process that resulted in the hiring of Lloyd Howell. union leadership started weaponizing player apathy against them because none of the players cared. And it was either they didn't care or they reacted to the external criticism as a rallying cry and a circling of the wagons. And all these meddling outsiders are trying to make our life more difficult. And they're criticizing our process, which means they're criticizing us. So we're going to take it personally and we're going to fight back. I don't know which it was, but there was something about all of it that seemed weird. And I joked when Lloyd Howell was hired, based upon his background, his lack of union experience, his alignment with corporate interests, his membership on the GE Healthcare board, which had a relationship at one point with the NFL and still might. I'm like, this guy could be a Manchurian candidate. And it was a joke. It was a joke. But man, after reading the thing today, it's like, funny joke. Ha ha. Joke's on the NFL-PA. And again, this is nothing against Lloyd Howell personally. It's the circumstance. It's no different than the stuff I said about Tom Brady and the conflict of interest he has between his job at Fox and his role as a minority owner of the Raiders. But here's where this is different. Lloyd Howell is the person in charge of the NFL-PA. He is the person who should be fighting solely and daily and without distraction or conflict of interest for the rights of the players. And it's impossible to do that if you have a side job where you're a consultant for a company that already has cozied up to the NFL, hopes to stay in the NFL's good graces, doesn't want to get stricken from the list of approved private equity funds. It should not exist. And it's 11:32 a.m. as I say what I'm saying now. It should have already happened this morning that Lloyd Howell was told, you've got to pick NFL-PA or the Carlyle Group. Right now, you've got to pick one or the other. And if he picks the NFL-PA and resigns from the Carlyle Group, that doesn't end it. Because part of the reporting from ESPN is that there's an outside lawyer who is now retained to review Lloyd Howell's activities during the 2 years he's been on the job. The end result of that could be it's time to move on with a new executive director. And again, it's nothing against Lloyd. It's about the circumstance. And man, it just seems like with everything that's going on, and I haven't even mentioned the pending federal investigation arising from the relationship between Lloyd Howell and One Team Partners, the group that was created by the NFL-PA, the MLB-PA, and other unions. And there's something going on there. And there was a whistleblower involved with that. And there was an investigation that allegedly, reportedly, Lloyd Howell shut down relating to the One Team Partners thing. Between the way the collusion ruling was handled, and now this clear conflict of interest that has been in place for his 2 years with the union, I think it's just a matter of time before he's gone. I'll be stunned if he's still in the job a year from now, 6 months from now, hell, 6 weeks from now. It just feels like it's reached critical mass. And if the players don't rise up and do it on their own, it could very well be that the report they get from the lawyer who's doing this investigation will be the thing that spurs action, which leads to a question that we got today. And I'm going to answer the rest of the questions later, but RB Roughnecks had a question. Does the NFL-PA have rules for removing any of the leadership with a vote? I looked at the Constitution, and in section 4.09, it says this: the executive director shall be subject to removal during his or her term upon a vote of 2/3 of the votes cast by the members of the board present at such meeting. And that's the Board of Player Representatives. So assuming they'd have a quorum, and I don't know whether and to what extent Robert's Rules of Order apply to the NFL-PA, but if you have enough there that it's a quorum, if at least 2/3 of the board members who are at the meeting say it's time to get rid of the executive director, then the executive director's out. You don't even have to have a reason. Now, there could be some friction between a finding along those lines and the things in his contract, and the executive committee negotiates the contract. But if the contract is written to say, above all else, if at any point 2/3 of the Board of Player Representatives vote to terminate this contract, it is terminated with no further compensation due and owing to the executive director, yada, yada, yada. That's a way for them to move on, move out, and terminate the relationship if they want to do it. So yes, there is a provision. The question is, will they use it? And it all comes back to, do they care? And look, hey, it's their union. If they don't care, I don't care. But at the same time, like, this sport has been very good to me. And people will say, why do you bite the hand that feeds you? Why do you criticize the NFL? You wouldn't have your career if it wasn't for the NFL. Well, first of all, the NFL didn't give me my career, okay? The NFL didn't hire me. The NFL exists, and it's something that attracts enough attention and interest that a separate industry has arisen from the coverage of the NFL. And the NFL benefits from the free publicity that ProFootballTalk.com gives to it. I mean, I've said this before. I devote my professional life to promoting their product at no charge to them. So the point is that door swings both ways. It's not just the NFL, it's the NFLPA. So if I should have any gratitude whatsoever to the great and powerful National Football League, I should have it in equal measure to the NFLPA, because there's no game without players. The players are the game. And to the extent that the players are apathetic, not pathetic, but apathetic, meaning they generally don't care about union issues, it's easy for me to say, fine, if you don't care, I don't care. But hey, given that I make my living covering your sport, and given that most of the people in the media are in bed with them, the owners, the league, the shield, big shield, I'll give you some free advice, players. You got to take your union back. You got to stand up and say, what the is going on here? Sorry, happy birthday, Matt Casey, and sorry you have to bleep that. But at some point, you got to do it, or they're going to keep running over you. Since 1987, the NFL has known that you will not take a work stoppage, that you will not miss a game check, that you will not miss a game, that you will not sacrifice a small portion of your own career for the greater good. They know that, and they use it against you. Now, your management seems to be using that same apathy, that same desire to just play football against you. What are you going to do about it? It's your union. It's your call. And the only reason I'm saying anything about it is, again, I feel a general obligation to the players, because without the players, there would be nothing for me to cover. There would be nothing for me to do. And I don't want to see anyone get taken advantage of. There's an imbalance in the force that is the National Football League. And the owners have benefited from it for years now. The players need to rise up. But before they can rise up and get on equal footing with the league, they got to rise up and take back control of their union. So, anyways, nothing against Lloyd Howell, nothing against J.C. Treader. I'm just looking at the circumstances that are in front of us right now, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, this is a friggin' mess. And you can either clean it up or you can let the mess get worse. And guess what's coming? Guess what's coming? A new CBA. So my next topic is, what would a new executive director mean for the NFL? It could be very bad for the NFL. It could be very good for the NFL. It depends on who the executive director is. But my guess is if they move on from Lloyd Howell, the replacement is going to be more along the lines of a D. Smith, somebody who's more inclined to fight. And I think the NFL had believed it had found a balance with Lloyd Howell that could be parlayed into 18 regular season games, 16 international games, and remember what the commissioner hinted at back in May? Gratuitous, unprompted. He talked about how much time the owners spent in their Minneapolis meetings discussing whether or not the current CBA is working financially. Does the salary cap work? When you look at all the costs. And I've heard some things without even trying to find them out. I've heard some things about owners trying to cut costs, owners being hypersensitive to what it costs to stage the international games, the costs associated with NFL media, which they've been trying to shed. They have to pay all the costs out of their half of the revenue because it's roughly a 50-50 split. The players get half, the owners get half, and the owners got to pay all the costs out of their half. And as that dollar that they're cutting in half gets bigger and bigger and bigger, at some point you say, wait a minute, we're doing this wrong. We don't have to give them half. We'll give them whatever we want to give them, and they'll take it because they're not going to miss a game check and they're not going to miss a game. They want to play football and they want to get paid. And yeah, look, it's not like it's going to be an unfair amount. It's going to be a significant amount, but it's not going to be half. Look at how fans react. Oh, we'll have to have a bake. Oh, you're only making $3 million this year. We need to have a bake sale. Doesn't matter whether or not it's fair. Once it's more than what the average person makes, it's enough. What are you whining about? Oh, you're not going to be able to feed your family on $3.85 million per year? So I think that's coming. And the league seems to be intent to try to not just have more games in the regular season, more international games, less than 50% of every dollar going to the players. The union's got to be ready for it. And it may not matter at the end of the day because the players very well may accept the last best offer that the league makes before the players start missing game checks. But you still want somebody who's going to fight like hell to get you the best possible deal, knowing that at the end of the day, the players are going to take the last best offer. You want that last best offer to be as good as it can. And my concern, current management is not going to get you the absolute best offer. They're going to do a deal that's going to look good, but it's not going to be as good as it needs to be. All right, let's flip to college football before I answer just a couple of questions today and wrap up this Thursday edition of PFT PM. Deion Sanders, the Colorado coach, said yesterday at the Big 12 Media Days that college football needs to have a salary cap. And hey, if you want parity, well, if you want parity of resources, a salary cap is good. See, if you have a salary cap, then the schools that put the best facilities in place, that are in the best locations, that have the best recruiters like Nick Saban, they benefit and they can try to stack the deck in their favor. But parity of resources doesn't necessarily lead to parity of outcome. But if you have a gross disparity of resources, then you are going to have super teams and everybody else. So Deion wants a salary cap, and that was already on my list of things to talk about. I saw just before I came down here, Mike Gundy, the longtime Oklahoma State coach, whose hair seems to be getting darker every year. Isn't he at the age where it should be getting, look at mine. Shouldn't it be getting grayer every year? Every year, that thing on his head gets a darker shade of brown. Anyway, that's mean-spirited. No, it's not. Why are you dyeing your hair? Mike, we all know. Mike, show a little self-awareness, baby. Wash that dye out of your hair. Let that gray mullet fly. It may look better. It will look better than the thing that everybody knows is phony. Anyway, mean-spirited. Anyway, Gundy said yesterday, and this came from an item on SI.com, that the players need to be regarded as employees. We all know they're employees. There needs to be collective bargaining. It's great to hear a coach say that. I saw that Reese Davis was on a podcast. I saw it over the weekend. It was on my list of things to get to if I, eventually had time, and I didn't. But good. It's one thing for Reese Davis to say it. It's another thing for one of the coaches to say it. The call's coming from inside the house. And this is what I've been saying ever since it became obvious that college football was going to run to the federal government and say, save us from the mess we made. We made a mess. We had decades of corruption where the players weren't getting paid. And you know what? We didn't know it was antitrust violations. And now we can't do anything because everything we try to do collectively violates federal law. There's nothing we can do. Please give us an antitrust exemption. Please create rules that would apply to how much players can make. Restrict how much money an American citizen can make. Can you imagine that? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unless you play college football, then we'll tell you how much you can make. What they need to do is fix the problem themselves. They need to have a nationwide union like the NFL has. How can the NFL have a salary cap? The NFL has the antitrust exemption that goes with having a multi-employer bargaining unit. You have one union, College Football Players Association. You have all of the schools who are members of the group, the multi-employer bargaining unit. Then you can negotiate rules. You can negotiate salary cap. You can negotiate transfer rules. You can negotiate any rules you want. There's two problems. You can never keep a guy from making money away from the field. One of the rules is going to be you're limited how much money you can make from your NIL rights. That's still going to be there. And if somebody's determined to funnel money, now at least there would be a way to keep the team's fingerprints off of it. But I mean, if somebody wants to pay someone a ridiculous amount of money to be the spokesperson for, Joe's Sporting Goods in Topeka, Kansas, it's a free country. So that reality can be the fly in the ointment. But the other thing is this, and here's why they don't want to do it. The coach, and that's why I'm surprised. I just wonder whether Gundy thought this through, because the coaches don't want collective bargaining because along with the rules that will limit player movement and limit player compensation and create a salary cap and yada, yada, along with that, there's going to be rules like, you can't have double sessions padded practices when it's 90 degrees. You can't have your former players who are 28 years old and trying to get back in the NFL show up and put on pads and have a fantasy camp and practice against 18-year-olds. The coaches aren't going to have the players under their thumb the way they now do. And we don't hear much about it, but those guys are there all year long in voluntary conditioning. They beat the shit out of those guys. Not literally, but they demand a lot from them. If you had a collective bargaining environment, the union would be negotiating rules that would limit the amount of power that the coaches have and the kind of demands that can be placed directly or indirectly on the players. That's why it's significant that Gundy is saying this, because he's the first coach to say it. And I think they recognize our only way out of this mess is to accept an environment of collective bargaining. And we don't want it to be professional football. Hey, it is, and it has been for years, for everyone but the players. I remember going to West Virginia game 20 years ago and saying, there's something wrong with the fact that everybody here who is working the game is getting paid, except the guys on the field that we came to watch, right? The school president is getting paid to hobnob with donors. The coaches are all getting paid. The staff is all getting paid. The ticket takers are getting paid. The concessionaires are getting paid. The guy selling popcorn out in the hot sun is getting paid. Everybody's getting paid except the players. And it was wrong. It was professional football then. It's professional football now. And the sooner they embrace it, the sooner they get out of the mess. All right, let me just answer a couple of questions real quick because I don't want this to be longer than 45 minutes, and I have a feeling I'm getting close. Cousin Vinny, you've been saying you're high on the 49ers to make it back to the playoffs. What's an AFC team you have the same feeling for? Hey, I think the Patriots are going to be pretty good this year. I think Mike Vrabel is going to come in and change the culture the right way. I think they've gotten some players that are going to make a difference, and the key is the coach. And Vrabel understands how to put a team together. And they're just being overlooked and disrespected enough. And there's just enough connective tissue back to the good parts of the Belichick era. I think the Patriots can make the playoffs. And I think the Patriots are one of those teams. I've talked from time to time about the mindset when you get to the playoffs. If you're a team that has consistently lost and that gets bigger and bigger each year, the stress, the narrative, like with the Ravens can't get to the Super Bowl, the Bills can't get to the Super Bowl. You got to shed that. The Patriots seem like the kind of team that could just show up and just take your lunch money in a postseason game. And nobody cares. Nobody expected us to be here. We're going to take it. You shouldn't have let us come to the party because we're going to take it. I'm not saying they're going to run it all the way to the Super Bowl, but they could upset a team or two if they get to the postseason. All right. Here's another one. I'm just going to do maybe one or two more. Let's just do this one. Wanderlust 2417. You mentioned in a recent PFT PM that you dislike the fact that the Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross, doesn't live and or work in Miami, and that this contributes to a lot of the organization's dysfunction. Does Ziggy or Mark Wilf live in Minnesota? It's a great point. It's a great point. And hey, I've had folks argue, folks who have dealt with the Vikings. Remember back around free agency when nobody knew, are they going to keep Sam Darnold? Are they riding with Justin Jefferson? People who were dealing with the Vikings didn't know who was calling the shots, didn't know who was in charge. Somebody who deals with the Vikings said, this is a team that is kind of low-key dysfunctional, but they've got the coach and the front office in place to make up for it to a certain extent. Like there are teams out there that are dysfunctional, but they have enough key players or key members of the organization, coaches, etc., to make up for the influence that ownership would have. And got a lot of respect for the Wilfs, but I'm a firm believer in ownership needs to be there every day. The team facility needs to be the base of operations for ownership of the team. Don't meddle, but be present. Let the employees know that you care about it as much or more than they do, because then they'll care about it even more because they see you. They see that this operation isn't just some investment that they made. Anyway, that's it for today. We'll be back to, I was getting to the point where I didn't know what I was going to talk about today. So thanks again to Don Van Natta and Kalen Kaler of ESPN.com for not one, but two excellent reports that really push this collusion story forward and make things very interesting at NFLPA headquarters, to say the least. Thanks for some of your time as always. We'll do it again on Friday. Check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.